You're listening to the Autism Weekly podcast. Each week, we share community voices and bring light to stories that increased awareness, acceptance, equity, access, and inclusion across the autism community. If you haven't already, subscribe to join the Autism Weekly family. This week, I'm excited to welcome Anna Bullard from the BHCOE, that's the Behavioral Health Center of Excellence, back to the podcast to talk with us about government relations on a state and national level as it relates to autism care. We're going to talk about what's currently going on in the legislature and what you can do to help make change. Anna is the ideal person to talk about this with us today, as she's currently the VP of Government Relations at the BHCOE. Anna also successfully passed legislation named after her daughter, Ava, who had been diagnosed with autism. Ava's law created access to therapy for individuals diagnosed with autism in Georgia. Her perseverance and knowledge in government relations and business development has led to thousands of lives accessing care nationally. Anna, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Jeff. So glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you back. The last time we talked, I believe, was episode number 49, and that's when we were learning a little bit about Ava's law. But what's new right now? What's coming across your plate that you're hearing or seeing in the autism world that you're going to be able to share with us today?
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, there are a lot of interesting pieces of legislation out there this year. Things just kind of popping up. It's actually been a challenge to really keep up. I'm surprised at how much legislation is really underway. A lot of it has to do with trying to align ABA with some of the other healthcare practices, right? So you're going to see licensure coming into play, whether it's licensure for BCBAs, licensure for facilities. You and I have talked a little bit about that. And then school-based services. There's, several bills to address limitations with children accessing care in the school. So a lot access issues or issues related to, trying to help ensure children are, protected where they're getting served.
So in a lot of healthcare is that you've seen a constriction over time where it feels like laws are being peeled back. It doesn't feel that way with autism at the moment. It feels like we're able to continue to open things up and people are getting more service, and even the idea of care is starting to evolve. What is it that you think right now, with it being Autism Awareness World Autism Month, and being such an important time for us to be able to accept autistics and the skills that they're bringing to the world, but also at the same time being able to treat, where's that balance coming legislatively? Are we doing enough, do you think, to be able to see both lenses?
No, I don't think so. I say that because, there's still so much disparity. There's so many kids still who cannot access even basic healthcare services to help them be able to live more independent lives, whether that is ABA or whether that's other types of behavioral health services, or whether that's services in their school setting to help them be successful. I'm still really surprised at how schools, really embrace autism. And I talked to a parent last week who was given one option, and that was a self-contained classroom. And it's just trying to help her maneuver through and being able to advocate in a very challenging situation, and in a situation where she definitely doesn't feel like the expert, right? But she has to be the expert to help ensure her child isn't just left behind. I mean, this is a child who should be allowed to be integrated to the best of his ability in a natural environment. On the healthcare side, we see many restrictions in school, right? I mean, whether it's a restriction from some odd, policy, that like in Florida, where there's just this, policy that I don't really think was intended to restrict RBTs from being able to be in the school. I don't think that was why it was originally. I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt here, right? I mean, I really don't, but that's what that policy. It was really policy was doing. So really trying to overcome that so kids can be successful. I mean, I feel like the reason that Ava was able to be as successful as she has been was because of the integration with ABA therapy and then working with the school to ensure that she was receiving those services she needed, and blending all that together has led to her being able to be independent and graduate in a regular ed classroom.
And that's one of the most painful things to see, is the fact that there are those restrictions, is that autism doesn't stop just because you go to school, and your healthcare needs don't stop because you're in school. And oftentimes, in order to get the most out of the education, the most out of the social opportunities, is that you need that treatment following you to be able to empower you through those times. So what is the legislation that you're currently seeing around schools, and what is the hope on that legislation? What would be the ideal process that comes from that?
I think it's twofold, Jeff, right? Because you really have to look at the separation in healthcare services and education services. There is a delineation. There's not a place to me where you can blend those two things in the sense of saying it's one or the other, right? You should have both. And I think that's the part that can be challenging. And you do have to be careful with legislation related to children receiving services in an education setting. And to me, it's not black and white. It can't be, right? That's the point of medical necessity, where when you're talking about healthcare services, being able to look at ensuring there's no restrictions on that child being able to access their healthcare in any setting, a school setting, community setting. I'm shocked sometimes in certain states where actually a child receiving services in a community setting is restricted. I mean, that blows my mind. Someone helping them be able to go to the grocery store, go out to eat, those types of normal activities are restricted from being billed by, a therapy service. And so, but in the school setting, there also has to be um, an effort put forth for kids with autism in what is evidence-based to help them being successful in their actual education. So I look at it as two separate things, and I think that you have to have appropriate legislation on both sides.
And as you talk through that, it makes, I mean, perfect sense that whether it's the community setting or the school setting, is that in those environments you're allowing other medical practices. You're actually encouraging to be able to normalize care. You're trying to be able to make it so that everything that somebody's receiving is that they benefit from the community around them. And it doesn't make sense. And I agree with you, is that the restrictions seem relatively arbitrary on this. And does this fall into kind of the Mental Health Parity Act? I mean, where is it that the federal government might be coming in on this? And is that helping any of the government relations that you're doing on the state level?
Yeah, I definitely think mental health parity is. I do think location applies to, when you're talking about mental health parity. If you're not restricting, medical benefits in any other, setting, then, services for autism should not be restricted. So that definitely should apply. I think where it becomes more challenging in the area of school services being received in the school is that there is that line where a lot of schools will argue that they are able, and I mean, we all know that no school is intended to provide healthcare services through the academic staff or the special education staff that they have. But I do see that a lot, where schools really draw that line saying, well, this is our role. And then there are a lot of schools who are very welcoming to others. But I think being able to really distinguish that, and that goes back to the clinicians being able to ensure that the medical necessity criteria is being able to really write that treatment plan where it is able to be expressed explicitly that it's in order to help that child be able to meet goals that are not necessarily academic related, right? But we all know there is some mesh in that, right? There is some level of overlap when you're talking about socialization. But ultimately, to me, what it should look like is you should have that piece of healthcare that integrates that child, and then ideally eventually be able to be transferred over to where that child can. Not every child is going to be able to do that, and certainly there is no magic number. There is no after 30 days. Everybody's different, and we know with autism, um, there's always barriers that come up that we never can foresee. And I think that's the challenging part for all of us, and even autistic individuals. Things that come up that are surprising and that really can be a setback. So to me, there's no magic number. There's no magic, you know, uh, black and white where you could say do this or do that. Um, it should be individualized on both sides.
Yeah, and the thought that there is a wall or a very concrete decision-making process to say this is educative, this is not educative, I think that is a very gray area. I don't know that there's a very linear thought process to, okay, well, this is where education ends and this is where socialization begins. And the way that you're looking at that, I think, as a clinical field, is that we should all approach it similarly, is saying that, the goal is independence across all these environments the child wants to be in. And if that's independently learning, if that's being able to access a group learning environment, we don't have to be in control of a curriculum on the clinical side, nor should we be in control of an academic curriculum. But for that medical benefit for the child is that they need to be able to access it. And if their behavioral or their learning profiles are not allowing for it, well, then we should be helping with that. We should be assisting in that process. So I love the fact that right now is that there's a lot of advocacy around that. Is that advocacy coming from grassroots, similar to Ava's Law, or is this something that is being pushed more in the clinical end?
It's interesting because I do think it is really being driven in my perspective, where I'm seeing the most activity on the clinical side. I certainly think it's parents, but I think the clinicians are having to be the ones to push harder because they're the ones that are having to really show that it is medically necessary. It's that important piece of the puzzle that the clinician is able to really meet that criteria, right? And then I also think that there is a place where parents are saying, you're not able to meet my child's needs. And the parent is really, I think, and this is how I was, I don't really care who pays for it. I mean, that's from a parent perspective. I thought, if my insurance should pay for it, if the school should pay for it. I mean, I think parents are very frustrated. They want their child to be successful. They want their child to be able to be integrated and have friends and have experiences and go to music class or art class or even to the lunchroom with their peers and those simple things. And then, definitely the academic part. But, I think parents are just at very frustrated at saying, whoever can help my child and help them the best, of course, we want that, right? But I think clinicians who are really having to drive it from the point of being able to help express why.
And it seems like a paradigm shift. I mean, when I think back to the original work that started opening up autism care, it was completely parent-led. It was grassroots. It was the clinicians took a back seat, and it feels like there's almost like an education gap right now that the clinicians need to be informing legislative processes on what that service really is and what the medical part to that service is. Is there other legislation that's starting to open up? I know that we just went through a pretty long period of having to be creative with care models, and telehealth was a big piece of that. Are you seeing legislation on telehealth? Is there going to be an extending process for that? Are states welcoming it on the go forward, whether that's for diagnostics or whether that's for some of the treatment that's occurring past diagnostic processes for the actual allocation of care?
Yeah, I think telehealth is, as we've seen through the pandemic, right? It's a critical component to mental health services and behavioral health services. Absolutely critical component. In Georgia, when we worked on Medicaid, we knew that telehealth had to be included because Georgia is such a rural state, right? And I mean anything outside of Atlanta, it's difficult to access any type of behavioral health services or mental health services. Even in Atlanta, you're going to see wait lists. So for us, it had to be a piece of the policy. So when we got Medicaid coverage in 2018, telehealth was included in that. I mean, it was embedded into the policy from day one. And that can include diagnostic services. It can include psychological services. So you could, or any type of behavioral health service, but it also includes ABA. So from the standpoint of your BCBA being able to, get on with FaceTime or and through the pandemic, I mean, there was even a lot of just telecommunication allowed. Um, I know for me, back all the way in 2008, there was no service. And so private paying for ABA was very expensive. And we used to record sessions on the computer, and we loaded them into a private YouTube account. So our BCBA could go in and watch them and then come back and tell me, this is what your technician needed, I mean, so I feel like I could not have made it without that. So I feel like it's a critical component. I think it obviously has to be evaluated on what children it's appropriate for. And that's such an important piece, but I think it's such a valuable component.
And you mentioned the underserved populations geographically, but
Mhm.
what I've been into conversations with pediatricians and psychologists alike about, and I guess I'll put this into the framework of diagnostics right now, but talking through this, it's not just the geographic dispersion that you're actually having to tackle. It's you don't have enough clinicians who can culturally integrate with the communities they're in. Is that sometimes you need language barriers that you need to be able to remote access into because you don't have enough Spanish speaking in one population, or you don't have enough people that speak Mandarin in one population. It could be a variety of different things. And this just opens up adequacy of network. And the legislation that's going on around this right now, I think is crucial for us on a go forward to be able to create a better treatment model that's more equitable and provides more access, which are both important things. What other key features of legislation? I mean, you had spoken about school. We hit on telehealth. Is there anything else that really is driving right now?
I think there's a couple of areas, a couple of states that have, Georgia was one that had licensure for BCBAs. And I certainly am not philosophically opposed at all to licensure. I think what we've seen come about from that is just huge delays in timelines for BCBAs to obtain those license. And I think I'm going to just say from my experience, which may not be the popular opinion for some of BCBAs who are real strong advocates for licensure. my what I learned from Ava's law and even working in some other states and on legislation is you have to be so careful that when you are bringing forth legislation that is related to the autism benefit in any way, there is always risk, always, because there's always opposition. And I don't know why. And I still, to this day, from the day I started working in 2007 on, politics and things related, government relations related to autism, I didn't understand it then. And I understand it now, but I guess I just am still shocked at the opposition. So there's risk, and you see those things happen, like what is happening in Illinois, where RBTs get thrown in, where they need to be licensed. And then in Illinois, there was this other piece that got amended literally in the bottom of the night, that would significantly, restrict businesses who are LLCs from practicing in the state of Illinois. Those things are critical. And when you bring forth legislation related to autism, there's always risk. And so, that's one of the things that in Georgia with the licensure piece, we worked very hard. It's good to have a provisional license in place. It's good to ensure there's restrictions on the timeline. We're hoping to build that board the same way Texas did, where literally it's a registry, everything's online. You can get licensed in Texas in 48 hours, right, Jeff? So, I mean, but you see Arizona where you're on a 6-month wait list to get your license. And that's before you can submit credentialing.
Yeah, some of these byproducts of what could occur, it would be nice if the right hand talks to the left hand and that you're able to learn from some of these other experiences. And hopefully is that the advocacy work that you're doing is also informative. It's helping people to realize I don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's other ways that have worked. And whether that's licensure, looking at Texas, and I believe that Utah actually did a pretty good job rolling out their licensure. It's as states start looking at it, is this that maybe there are ways to learn from that experience so that you're not causing access to care issues. So how do you advise that people A, stay informed, but B, get involved in this process, whether that's the clinicians now who probably didn't have as much role in the past, or the families because their voice is so powerful?
Yeah, I think that, I think there are positives, right, to licensure in the sense from the family's perspective. You want to make sure that yes, there are parameters in place, that the individual coming to serve you, coming to your house, or that you're dropping your kid off at the clinic or at the school, right, is that there is some level of protection and some understanding of who they are, and that they meet the qualifications that they should. So from a family's perspective, I do think that's a valuable piece. I mean, that's one of the pieces that at BHCOE we work hard to educate families on also. How should you get involved in knowing that the services you're receiving are quality services? Like understanding what that looks like, understanding how to make that determination. I think that's really important for families. But families also, when I talk to families about any type of regulation that's coming out, their involvement needs to be, make sure that my child is safe, make sure that my child has access. Those things have to go hand in hand. You can't be a trade-off. It can't be, you're going to license and BCBAs or, anything like that. But the trade-off is my kid can't access service for 9 months or a year, right? Families need to make sure that their voice is heard in that. I think clinicians are doing a really good job actually of standing up and expressing for their field and for what they're doing. What are the important factors in that? So I feel I feel like clinicians are really finding their foothold and their place in advocacy, that is related to the quality of work that they're doing and how that's important.
Yeah, and I'm going to sidestep a little bit because you've mentioned quality on several different times. And right now is that the safety, the appropriateness of care, and the quality of care and access are the four key factors that are really driving how to be able to navigate autism service provision. I know that the Behavioral Health Center of Excellence has just recently started a new initiative, and I'd love to just give you a little bit of a platform right now because it hits on some of this quality. And licensure is a piece to protection, but quality goes beyond that. And maybe you can explain a little bit about what you're doing at the BHCOE right now on the quality initiatives that I think just rolled out and informed the rest of us on what the hopes are.
Yeah, we're so excited. We've been sitting on this, and so we're so excited to actually this morning, hot off the press, announce our collaboration with Cigna on a value-based pay model that really is the goal of this is not for BHCOE to say, here's the quality measures everyone should be doing, and nor Cigna. The goal is collaboration. So we'll be putting together work groups. Those work groups will consist of providers. It will consist of family members and autistic individuals, and then the payer, of course. And those work groups will really evaluate and build what will be a meaningful framework to determine what are true measures of quality that we can say that everyone needs to be focusing on to ensure children are making progress and making the progress that they can make, right? And so I think it's going to be such an exciting collaboration, such an exciting opportunity. Cigna is really a strong partner, and they really want to build a framework that is going to be meaningful. And so we are just very fortunate to be able to make this connection and include everyone, right? That's the part that I'm so excited about. We're really able to include everyone in this next phase and start to look at incentivizing providers too, right? I mean, that's what, providers, I know that it's been a difficult time for them, right? Through the pandemic and all, trying to keep staff, trying to figure out how to manage turnover and all the, things that have occurred through the pandemic. And so I think this is also a way for them to begin to really be incentivized for the quality work that they're doing.
Yeah, I truly appreciate the work that you all are doing on that. And as you take volunteers, you got one right here. So don't lose my number on that call. But I appreciate, Anna, the time that you've spent with government relations and helping to advocate and educate, and also for taking the time to be able to talk with us here today.
Thank you for listening to Autism
that
Weekly.
Gives people
we hope you tune back in next week
to go out there and continue to advocate on their own behalf. So,
Autism Weekly is now found on all the major listening apps. We appreciate it,
and hopefully we get you out to the podcast
Google
again
Podcasts,
soon.
Stitcher,
thanks,
Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. Subscribe to be notified when we post a new podcast. Autism Weekly is produced by ABS Kids. ABS Kids is proud to provide diagnostic assessments and ABA therapy to children with developmental delays like Autism Spectrum Disorder. You can learn more about ABS Kids and the Autism Weekly podcast by visiting abskids.com. Thanks for tuning in. See you again next week.